Prologue. 2 days ago, the sage handed me the tome he had been composing for decades. It's my life's work, he said. A strange look flashed across his face, one I wouldn't have expected. It was part shyness and part desire for approbation. But why would the great Valmiki want approval from me? A queen bereft of her kingdom, a wife rejected by her husband at the height of his glory. I had come to Valmiki's hermitage having lost everything except the babies I carried inside me. I was forever in debt for the refuse he had given me at the most crucial moment. I'd like you to be the first one to read it, he said, before I give it to your sons to sing. After all, it's your story too. I glanced down the palm leaves in my arms, a hefty stack reaching higher than my heart. A shudder went through me, shadow, longing and fury and love, as I saw the title Ramayana, the story of the glorious King Ram, my husband. I stayed up through the night and the next night in my thatched hut at the edge of the ashram reading. The oil in the lamps burned away without my noticing. In the next room, my 14-year-old sons woke up at the smell of the scorched wicks and came to ensure that I was safe. Love, always been protective of me, took me by the shoulder and said, "You must sleep, and you'll make yourself, or you'll make yourself ill. What's so urgent that it can't wait until morning?" But Kush, the perceptive one, touched the dried salt on my cheek with a gentle finger and said, wondering, for it had been years since they had seen me so distraught. "Ma, why are you weeping?" I kissed their heads, my boys balanced on the precarious edge of manhood, and sent them back to their beds with words of assurance, but I didn't lie down. Morning came, wind whispered in the trees, mango, coconut, jackfruit, but I had planted around that I had planted around the edges of the ashram in the early years when I needed work to distract me from my grief. On the river bank, I heard the voices of the ashram dwellers greeting the sun with prayer. The purest notes were those of my sons, for they were adept at both weaponry and song. I waited until the assembly was dispersed, each to his or her task, and then I took the manuscript back to Valmiki. The sage looked at me, curious. "It's very good," I said. "The poetry is superb, the description sublime, the rhythm perfect. You have captured the histories of earth and heaven both, the adventures and the wars, the weddings and the death, the betrayals and the farewell, the palace and the forest. But I said, and I couldn't keep the anger from my voice. What occurred when I was alone in the darkness under the sorrow tree, you don't know. You don't know my despair. You don't even know the exhilaration, how it felt. First in the forest, then in Ayodhya, when I was the most beloved woman in creation. I wrote that I wrote what the divine vision showed me, he said. It must have been a god that brought it to you, then, not a goddess. I said dryly, for you haven't understood a woman's life, the heartbreak at the core of her joys, her unexpected alliances and desires, her negotiations where, in the hope of keeping one treasure safe, she must give up another. I expected anger, for he had lavished a lifetime on this book, but not for nothing is he called Maharshi Great Sage. You must write that story yourself, Ma, he said, for only you know it. He took out a few sheaf of the pounded leaves, a set of quills, items precious that hard to come by in the forest retreat. He called to an apprentice to carry his writing table to my room. He rummaged in a chest and handed me a sealed bottle of ink. Hurry, he said. Time grows short. I walked to my room, shaky with responsibility and trepidation. Time was indeed short. All these years, my husband, yes, to my ch- chagrin, I still thought of him as such, had left me alone to raise my sons, allowing me, uh, if not happiness, at least a tenuous peace. Tenuous peace. But now the planets were shifting, everything was about to change again. I barred the door and sat cross legged on the ground and arranged the palm leaves on the table. Outside, I could hear Valmiki teaching my sons how to sing the epic, where to raise their sweet silver voices in affirmation, where to whisper dark and shiveringly of the treachery of Rakshasas of human failings. They'd be performing it soon if his vision was true, and I both feared and hoped that it was in front of Ram, king of Ayodhya, the father they had never met, the man who had banished them to the forest for no fault of their own even before they were born. If Valmiki's vision was true, soon I too would be facing him, Ram, monarch, father, warrior, husband, the beloved who abandoned me when I needed him the most, my greatest joy and my greatest despair. But I had a task to complete before that. I took a deep breath and touched the first palm leaf to my forehead, invoking Saraswati, goddess of creativity, serene on her white swan. Though a part of me wondered what she could know of my very human tribulations, unplugged the inkpot and was startled to see the color the sage had chosen for me, red. But of course, how else could I write my story except in the color of menstruation and childbirth, the color of marriage mark that changes women's life, the color of flowers of the Ashoka tree under which I had spent my years of captivity, in the palace of the demon king. I picked up the quill and closed my eyes. I knew what I must do. I'd travel back to the beginning, to the moment I met Ram, become again the girl I had been on that day, burnished with innocence, believing the goodness and love were armor enough. That was where I had to start. But as I dipped my quill into the ink pot, they rose inside me, voices, some clamoring, some tentative, some whispering, so that I had to still my breath to hear them. Kaikai, second queen of Ayodhya, who wrested a throne from us out of blind devotion to her son, only to be hated by him for later it. Ahalya, her beauty turned to stone by a husband's jealous fury, Supranakha, wild enchantress of the forest, whose gravest crime was to desire the wrong man. Mandodari, wife of the legendary demon king, forced to watch her kingdom fall into ruin and her beloved son perish because of her husband's obsession with another woman. Urmila, my sweet sister, the forgotten one, the one I left behind as I set off with blithe ignorance on my forest adventure with my husband. Write our story too. For always we have been pushed into corners, trivialized, misunderstood, blamed, forgotten, or maligned, and used as cautionary tales. Yes, I said to them, yes, I'll write your stories as best as I can, for without them, mine can't be complete. I set quill to leaf. In red ink, I began to write in crooked, effortful lettering because it had been so long since I had composed anything. The Sitayan one. The day that was to change my life started with any other. I walked through the extensive gardens of my father, King Janak, reveling in the feel of the soft grass beaded with dews of dawn on my bare foot. I was accompanied by the chief gardeners, for I was the overseer of the palace arbors, an unusual duty for the princess. They pointed out problems they had been able to solve: a garnal champak refusing to flower, a rare harshingar shriveling up no matter what they try, a copse of bamboos with black rot creeping up their stalks, a stroked leaves dug around roots, withered prayers. Behind me, I could hear the odd whispers of the gardeners. Amazing, miraculous. Look, they have already healing. I tell you, she's the earth goddess herself, appeared straight out of the ground just to bless us. They exaggerated, of course. And although I had been told them clearly that I'm human, just like them, their veneration seemed to increase every year. All this was because of how my father found it. Yes, found. Though by virtue of my upbringing I was a princess, Sita, the eldest daughter of the house of Mithila in the kingdom of Vaideha, no one knew who I was by birth. Father told us this story many times. It was one of my favorite and my sister Urmila's as well. The morning I was found, he had gone to till the field beside the palace to level it for the yagna that was to occur soon. He was fond of holy ceremonies and liked to participate in their preparations. If destiny hadn't placed upon him the duty of governing his people, he would have happily spent all his time at the feet of the rishi, listening to a treatise of the nature of supreme reality. That that day, however, only a few steps into his plowing, he was forced to stand still. A baby lay in his path, naked and newborn, glistening in the young sun as though it was a mirage. He was amazed that I didn't cry, regarding him instead with unblinking eyes. I had kicked off the clothes that swaddled me, a gold fabric finer than anything our Mithila weavers could produce, with strange and intricate designs, the likes of which no one has ever seen. Believers said the gods had gifted me to the good king, who was childless in spite of years of effort. Skeptics wondered which cunning person had placed me there at just the right moment to be discovered by Janak. It must have been someone who knew my unworldly father well, they whispered. Other kings would have had the child removed without considering her fate. At best, they would have ordered for her to be brought up in the servant's home. But my saintly father picked me up and held me to his chest, and as he did so, a great hunger within him was assuaged, and he was at peace. This was my first lesson on the nature of love, that in the moment it could fulfill the cravings of a lifetime, like a light that someone might shine into cavern that has been dark for a million years, the power of love. It fascinated me from an early age. I thought about it often, even though I didn't quite understand what it was. The strange gift with plants was mystery to me. Perhaps it was because, like them, I was earthborn, maybe for the same reason. When I touched a plant, I knew its healing properties. I could tell which grasses cured headaches and colds, which seeds fended off infections, which herbs to give women when their monthly period flowed too long, which potions healed the shaking sickness or gladdened a long depressed heart. And so, after my garden walk, I made my way to my other responsibilities, healing house adjoining the palace. Our servants were the first to learn of my abilities and to seek my help. My queen mother, Sunena, who was more concerned than delighted, tried to keep my skill a secret, but news traveled. Soon, people suffering from diseases deemed incurable would drag themselves across the country to the capital, begging to see me. They needed a place to stay, and finally, my mother accepting defeat, building the healing house. Today, I examined many of the sick and instructed the physicians on the administration of the unguents and potions. Finally, I moved to the Hall of the Dying, which was always difficult. At my touch, they grew quiet and breathed easy, and some did not open their eyes again. Only one man who had been in unbearable pain because the Karkat disease clutched him with his dread claws, grabbed my hand and touched it to his forehead, whispering the word again. Goddess. I'm no goddess, I said to him sadly. Otherwise, I would have saved you. But he was gone already, a faint smile lingering on the edges of his lips. I closed his eyes, sighed, and turned to leave. I was late for my secret lesson in the martial arts. Though I never would have confessed this to my family for fear of hurting them. I often wondered where I had come from, because what called me to most powerfully were the forest that I could see from the palace turrets, rain cloud colored, mysterious, full of stories they pushed up against our kingdom from every side. No one in my family felt the way I did about forests. Sanatan, Sanatana, my father's chief advisor, distrusted them deeply. The forests, the Rakshasas who lived in them. He was little obsessed by Rakshasas. Our Sanatanda, he spoke often about how fierce and wild they were. Not like humans, they bred in darkness, practiced dark magic, they loved to feed on human flesh. They were watching us, he claimed, watching and waiting to take us over. He was always trying. They loved to feed on human flesh. They were watching us, he claimed, watching and waiting to take us over. He was always trying to get my peaceable father to line our borders with sentinels to cut back the wood. Have you seen a Rakshasa? I once asked him. He refused to dignify my disbelief with an answer. Instead, he sent my father a telling book. Look, this is what happens when you don't discipline girls as they ought to be. I wasn't sure where Sanatanda was right about Rakshasa, but I was certain he didn't understand forest. I wanted to visit a forest someday, though I didn't think I'd ever be granted the opportunity. It wasn't something that women did. Even my mother, the most intelligent person I know, would have been baffled if I confessed this desire to her. So I satisfied myself by standing on the terrace on monsoon afternoons, watching the silvery rain bathing the tops of distant trees, lightning cracked open the sky, spilling its longing into me. Sometimes I dreamed that I was walking the wilderness with its swaying grasses, its leaping golden beasts, the earth mother, the way she had been before people bent her to their desires. The forest dream wasn't the only one I had. At other times, a wide expanse of water came to me in sleep, stretching to the horizon, filled with tumultuous waves. Rode over it, and beneath its surface, huge amphibious monster waited, ready to pull anyone who ventured close into its dark depths. The scene terrified and excited me at the same time. Once, when I told my mother about it, she said I must have dreamt of an ocean. Did you ever Did you ever take me to see one when I was little? I asked. No, she said. There aren't any no oceans near Mithila. Even our songs don't mention them. I had never seen one myself, only read of them in books. I wonder where that dream came from. She kissed my hand and sent me off to play, but I could feel her watching me, perplexed. I knew the real question in her mind. I wonder where you come from. My martial arts lessons, which I loved, were secret because my father abhorred violence in any kind, even when it was necessary. My mother had to force him to rally our troops when every once in a while our neighbors took advantage of his peace loving nature and encroached of our territory. She was in some ways the real ruler of Mithila, a sharp of intellect, clear of vision, balancing kindness with justice. Often my father brought particularly thorny problems of state to her. They would discuss the issues in her bedchamber late into night, and the next day he would do as she consulted. But she never let anyone outside the immediate family know this. Soon after I had told her about my ocean dream, my mother asked if I had like lessons in self defense. I was surprised but delighted. I loved the idea of being a warm warrior. I asked if Urmila would be joining me. I was very fond of my sister, though she was quite different from me, always wanting to play with dolls and dress up in mother's jewelry and entertain the daughters of ministers or visiting dignitaries. No, she said. Why me then? I asked. I sense that your future is going to be different from that of most from princesses. She said. It might take you to dangerous places where you will need to defend yourself, but let's keep it a secret. I happily agreed. Every day for the next few years, mysterious women from hills that surrounded our city came, one by one, veiled against curious eyes, to my mother's personal courtyard to teach me. They didn't train me in the use of weapon, but what they taught was better. How the body itself could become a weapon, how the opponent body, its weight, its awkwardness, its ignorance of your strategy could be used against him. I learned to move like a panther on the hunt, to run and leap and climb in silence, to fall right away without injury, to accept pain when it came. The woman didn't spare me, and I often ended my lesson with bruises and aching muscles and sometimes a sprain. But they would massage me with unfamiliar herb oils afterwards so that my hurts disappeared. And as I grew older, they taught me how to make these oils. My mother was our only spectator. She watched me in silence, neither praising nor chiding nor expressing concern. But today, when after a strenuous fight, I backed my teacher into a corner and kicked out her feet from under her, forcing her to raise her hands in surrender, Queen Sunena smiled. She hugged me to her, sweat and all, and said, now I'm much ease as a mother can be sending her daughter out into the wild world. Her words sent a shiver through me, part of excitement, part fear. I'm not going anywhere, Ma, I said, hugging her back, letting the smell of the jasmines in her hair wash me over. I'm going to stay with you always. But we both knew that was wishful thinking. Girl childhood. Oh, girlhood was ephemeral as a drop of water on a lily pad. Soon I had to leave all that I loved, parents, sister, palace, garden, the healing house, to take my place in another family which I must then call mine. Thus, the lot of daughters, commoner or princess.